If you are a parent raising a preteen or a teen, this is for you. If you find yourself getting frustrated, yelling, things like screen time, confidence, motivation, you're really curious on what's going on with your children's behavior, and you just haven't yet found a way to find practical tips and strategies on how to support them on a daily basis. You might be feeling the pressure, the cultural pressure that you need to do something to change this behavior. For the last 14 years, I've been educating parents on understanding emotional behavior. And this course is packed with practical tips and strategies on how to understand your children's behavior now, how to create the connection that you desire in your relationship, how to parent your way, maybe not even the way that your partner parents, how to feel aligned and confident, and really support your children with their big emotions like anger and anxiety and overwhelm. So inside this mini course, what I've decided to do is go right to those things that I have noticed parents see biggest transformation quickest. So if you're willing to commit 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day on seeing and understanding your children's behavior on a deeper level, head on over to heatherchauvin.com/parenting. Do you ever find yourself incredibly frustrated because you know your child's brain works differently? And you know that sometimes they don't fit in. One, it pulls at your heartstrings, but two, you just want to learn to advocate on their behalf. And it's exhausting when you're also trying to do all the other adult things, and you've been gifted this child who's wired differently. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Kat Baker. We talk about her own challenges with ADHD, dyslexia, and anxiety, and what it was like growing up as that child, having professional parents, and who she needed to become in order to now parent her own son. It's that balance and duality between learning to be human in this world. What do we take on as parents that is actually not ours to do? It's that fine line between the spiritual path, the journey, the humanness of being human. It doesn't matter if you are a child or an adult. Every person is going to have struggles and challenges. So how do we guide our children through this process, especially those who are wired differently? This is something that we don't sign up for as parents. We have children. It's a primal instinct to do so. And then you're gifted this child who is challenging you constantly to navigate certain systems, to advocate on their behalf. And it's almost like you have to get your own PhD in understanding human behavior in order to learn why you're yelling, why your child may or may not be listening to you. So in our conversation today, Kat and I dive deeper into becoming a mini behavioral analyst in your home, seeing and understanding your children's behavior on a different level. And maybe my hope is maybe taking a little pressure off yourself as a parent. Dr. Kat Baker founded the Florida Children's Institute in 2014 to make a difference for children and families coping with a wide range of behavioral issues and learning disabilities. In spite of having ADHD, dyslexia, and anxiety herself, Dr. Baker earned a PhD in psychology from the University of Florida. She has a whole bunch of other education under her belt, and she's passionate about helping children and families who don't fit in the box and who have brains that work differently to reach their potential because of her own personal experience. So let's dive into today's episode and go check her out at FloridaChildren'sInstitute.com. This is Dr. Kat Baker.
Growing up and into my 30s, I was always a high achiever, a hard worker, a people pleaser, the smart kid. These all sound great, right? Wrong. These were the ways that I was trying to cope with a brain that works a little differently. I was trying to compensate for feeling like I wasn't ever quite as smart as my peers or my brother or my parents, or I wasn't working hard enough, or I was lazy because I couldn't finish my reading. I would bend over backwards to make everyone around me happy, because if they were happy, then they would be happy with me. The toxic relationships that led to are a story for another day. But these coping strategies were slowly killing me inside and causing my true self to shrink. You see, I have ADHD and dyslexia. And when those aren't well managed, I get crazy bad levels of anxiety trying to manage them. And by the way, this is a super common pattern in people whose brains work a little differently or don't fit in the box. My ADHD was caught early on, around the second grade, but the dyslexia wasn't identified until I was in college. The tests from early on showed that I wasn't really that great at spelling or reading, but tutoring helped, and I was doing okay enough by the sixth grade, so tutoring stopped, and then I was left to my own devices to learn in middle school and high school. I thought that the reason that I never finished my reading in high school was because I was lazy, and to deal with that, I worked even harder. So by working my ass off and extreme people pleasing became my way of proving to the world and to myself that I was good enough to take up space. Both my parents are doctors and very well respected in the community. Everyone knew me as, oh, your parent is my doctor, or I love your mom and dad. They're so kind. I was also the oldest and definitely felt like I had to be perfect, especially academically. When I started struggling with reading, or at least when people noticed that I was struggling with reading, there wasn't much research on how to help kids like me. In the 20 years since then, research has changed. But at that point, the only resource my mom could find was speed reading courses. Not ideal for a kid whose brain struggles to figure out the words on the page. My mom still beats herself up about that, but I always remind her that the struggles I had in school are the reason that I love what I do now. The absolute torture that school was at times, especially college pre-diagnosis, means that I really, in my core being, get what my clients are going through, and it fuels me. They're the reason that I had enough passion for psychology and human learning to go to graduate school in the first place. Once I learned how my brain worked, and I learned to work with it instead of against it, I earned a total of 4 degrees in health and exercise science, psychology, child development, developmental disabilities, and behavior analysis. I now love learning. I'm a permanent student. I just learn a little differently. And I learned to never give up, even when the going gets really hard, or as our beloved Heather would say, emotionally uncomfortable. It really is my passion in life to love on and support and teach those who think differently. We all have amazing talents, and just because you're a little bit different, it isn't a bad thing.
Thank you. Do you believe that our pain is our purpose?
I think it can be. Yeah, I think my purpose comes from my pain. I don't think that my pain itself is my purpose, but helping other people maybe not have to deal with so much pain, or learn how to better deal with their pain, because everybody's going to have pain.
Yeah.
It's unavoidable. Just learning how better to deal with it, I guess, could be our purpose.
I'm so fascinated by this, because who I am now, and I think that's why we have very different stories, but similar paths. And, I look at who I am now as an adult, and I get the freedom to choose the work I want to do or how I work, and understanding every day that my brain is different, never having a formal diagnosis. I'm sure if I did, I would be diagnosed with whatever. But really observing and looking, I have freedom to choose, right? So you and I have had many conversations about children, raising boys, male brain. I'm sure you see a lot of patients with behavioral or emotional, what they would call outbursts or tantrums, and parents not understanding their children's behavior. But I always look and I think of how little control children actually have over how they learn, their environments and things like that. So how do you think our current educational system plays in not just understand, it's not about a diagnosis or understanding the brain, more of like the frustration and emotional well-being of children in general.
Ooh, good question. You knew I would like that question. I think that essentially our education system, while it's trying to catch up, is behind the times, right? As far as understanding how our brains work and understanding that brains all work differently, right? And it's unfortunate, I think, for a lot of kids who are trying to fit into the box. I call it fitting in the box, right? And I talk about the educational system being this brown square box that everybody, kind of cardboard box, right? That everybody's supposed to fit into. But, my personal box on a particular day might be rainbow and sparkles, and it might be octagonally shaped and not square. But the thing is, like, you can't make those two things fit together. And trying to make those two things fit together, I think a lot of times is what causes the frustration. And when you do think differently, I always tell parents, it's not a bad thing once we get the kids to college or past college, right? Because then they can kind of make up their own path. It's really just giving them the skills to get through through high school. But I'm
wondering why you're like just laughing hysterically right now.
Because I have this conversation with parents all the time. And you're right, parents come to me unbelievably frustrated. And I'm like, dude, I get it. I have been your child. My parents were you. I am now a parent of a kid who, this stuff is genetic. My kid's probably going to think differently too. So, but I'm laughing because it's like, this happens so frequently. And this is such an uphill battle for so many people. But, I think that our educational system just doesn't look at the beauty that other really cool, just slightly different brains bring to the table. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that I will say is, if you are a parent listening to this, don't get frustrated because your kid's going to be really badass when they get past this. I think kids who think differently and have to figure out how to fit in the little brown box tend to develop a natural resilience, right? They learn how to be resilient way earlier on. So then when life inevitably does hand them, some sort of terrible situation, they have more resources already to get past it. And they do really cool things because they do think differently and they think outside the box and come up with cool stuff. Mm-hmm. So whatever that stuff may be, tech or, who knows, stuff that we're not even going to know about right now. The kids or our boys are going to come up with something really cool that we're like, wait, what? I don't even understand.
So what do you tell parents? There's many avenues to, and I'm talking about children's behavior in general. So we're not even going down the avenue of like ADHD or a diagnosis and understanding that brain. It's how do I parent a child who has what do they call it? Neurodivergent.
Neurodiverse or neurodivergent. Yeah.
Brain.
Yeah.
And is that not every child or is that a specific child? Because I feel like more and more, like more brain development or research, we're discovering like, wow, there's so much out there. So we're putting children in boxes, we're controlling them. So what types of skills or strategies do you teach parents when they're like, please help me?
Please, for the love of God, help me, get me out of this situation.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing I always say is behavior is communication, right? So nobody behaves for some willy-nilly reason. There's always a reason that somebody's doing something. We may not understand what that reason is, but it's communication. So that's the first thing. Just start looking at your kids' behavior as their mode of communication. And we also have to remember, they're tiny humans. They haven't developed all the skills that we have had. And even as adults, we are not that skilled sometimes in communicating effectively, right? So it's really rough on our kids to put that unrealistic expectation that they're going to be able to communicate with us perfectly every time. So look at their behavior as their means of communication and be kind of an analyst. I mean, I'm a behavior analyst. I look at, what does their behavior mean? What is it doing? Why are they doing what they're doing? So that's the second part. I teach parents how to kind of be a mini behavior analyst and use their child's behavior as data or information to figure out what's going on. And then from there, you can figure out how to help them, right? And the other piece I talk about is kind of a coach mentality, right? Like you cannot live your child's life for them. You cannot prevent life from happening to them. So your job as a parent is to be on the sidelines, cheering them on and helping them solve problems and practice their skills so they're ready for the game, right? Like think about a basketball game. I'm a big basketball fan. The coach is not on the court playing for the players. The players are playing. If a player struggles with their free throw shots, then they're going to be practicing free throw shots in practice the next day, right? So if a kid has a meltdown in Publix or a grocery store, wherever, whatever your local grocery store is, then you practice their coping strategies at home. You teach them how to take deep breaths. You use emotion words at home so that they're practicing it, because you can't do it for them. You're not at school with them when they have a meltdown, so you have to kind of be a coach more than a doer. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I know you mentioned something in your story about your mother and that she did the best that she could, and she was a physician, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was a pediatrician, so she really kicks herself for not knowing what to do.
I won't go down that path, but yes, I've never actually gone to a pediatrician who knew about child's behavior.
I love it.
I'm just going to make that statement. But she cared. That's the whole point. Yeah. She actually cared, and she wanted to really, really support you. And the fact that somebody who's educated did not understand this stuff beyond kicking herself, because she sounds like a magical human being. So I'm not really talking about your mother specifically. I'm talking about like any adult. Going back to that little version of you, little Kat, how do you wish a parental figure or a teacher or a role model would have shown up for you, regardless if they knew your diagnosis or not? What did you really need?
I think a little less pressure on perfect academics. It's funny that you asked that, because I have a card that sits right in front of my desk, and I'm not going to show it. I'll show you the back, because it has people's names on it, and they're the people that actually did show up the way I needed them to. And all 4 of them are actually teachers. I work with teachers a lot, so I put their names on there because I wanted to be able to channel their energy, so to speak. But those 4 teachers did not let me slack off. They did not, let me cut corners or anything like that. They did take extra time to sit with me and help me work through stuff, and help me learn around whatever was a barrier. And one of them is the guy that figured out that I had dyslexia, and I will never forget the way he looked. I will never forget the way his office looked when he told me, "Kat, you're not stupid. You just don't read fast." And that's called dyslexia. I mean, that's kind of simplifying what dyslexia is, but I was like, wait, what? I'm not stupid. So just something that simple set out, and you never know kind of what the timing is going to be, right? Or what's going to land for your kid. Or if you're a teacher, for your students, but basically just constantly saying, you're not stupid, or you're good, you're fine, I'm here, we're together, we're going to work through it. I think it's kind of, again, back to that coaching mentality of like, you're here to push them, show them that they can accomplish something, but so you're not cutting them any slack, but you're also right there next to them, helping them do it. You're not doing it for them, though. Does that make sense? Like you're alongside them.
Yeah, you're not allowing their diagnosis to be the reason why they can get away with certain things.
Exactly.
It's like, I see you. I'm still showing up for you. You are a human that is worthy of succeeding, and it's going to be emotionally uncomfortable. It doesn't matter how your brain works. This is still not going to be fun all the time.
Right.
Now, okay, this is like the duality of the conversation I want to pivot to. I am a mother to 3 very different learners, and 17, 12, and 10. And wow, like night and day with all 3 of these humans. In hindsight, looking at, I guess what I'm trying to say is, for many, many years, I blamed my parents, just like everybody else who blames their parents, for why there was something wrong with me, or why didn't you get me the help that I was supposed to get, all the things. And they definitely didn't have access to the resources that they have access to now. But now that I'm a mother and I am watching my children with their learning style, it is such a self-awareness process that, like, I don't know if they're struggling, right? So do you ever have that experience? You're like, I was that child. I am now a mother to a child. Holy shit. It's that weird mind game of like this duality. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm like, they're going to blame me, but at the same time, it's not my fault.
Yeah. Like, I know, here I am, a behavior analyst who works with children for a living. And sometimes I'm parenting my own son and I'm like, was that the right choice? Was that the right thing? Oh my God, he's totally going to talk to his therapist when he's older about this particular moment where mama fucked it up.
But where do we figure this out? Where it's like, this is the imperfection and messiness of parenting and raising children, regardless of how their brain functions.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that it is the imperfection and the messiness, right? Like, I talked about the fact that I felt like I had to be perfect. And if I was perfect, then people would like me, right? So, or be happy with me or proud of me or whatever. So it's kind of in learning to release my own imperfection, then it's also teaching our kids to do the same thing, I guess, or like, it's okay to be imperfect. Who knows? Probably by the time they grow up, there'll be some other issue that they're going to have to deal with. But like, that's, we're not perfect.
It's like this perpetual cycle, though, of like, I think when the privilege of being in this world of psychology or whatever, you're like, yeah, we're all messy. Like, we're all messy humans. And people kind of outside of that world who have like never gone to therapy in their entire life or ever spoken about an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so weird. You're like, oh yeah, like everyone is like feels broken on the inside in some capacity or not enough. Right?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think we definitely, having been in this, I mean, we get tons of parents at the office. What we think is normal, and we're like, oh yeah, we see this all the time. No big deal. Right? Because we see it all the time. But the parent, that's their only child, or like that's their first child. They've never parented before, and kids don't come home with a little manual that says, hi, here I am. Here's my manual on how to parent me. So I think, I guess as being in the field, a little more open to being different. And I think that's also why, I am so open about all of my stuff, because if I'm not, who is going to be, right? And I always talk to parents about, show your kids, right? They are watching you regardless of whether you want them to be or not. So, helping your kid learn to be a little bit different is also you learning to parent differently. And it's probably you changing some of your own behaviors and habits, and because they're watching you. So if you want them to behave different, you're probably going to have to behave differently, which parents don't really like to hear me say that, but it's true. And parents aren't paying me to, let them get by. I've got to push them a little bit too. So, I think
I was going to say, there's something that you just said, which is, it's almost like we start going to therapy or reading the books or doing something because we want to understand how to change our children's behavior or understand our children's behavior and be like, this must be fixed. This must be fixed. There's something wrong here. Okay. Oh shit. Now my child has had a diagnosis. Well, how do I fix that? How do I change that? And in the journey, of course, there are ways to manage and cope and improve your quality of life. But in the journey, we're not really learning to manage anything. We're just learning to understand.
Right. And it's not about fixing your kids' behavior. It's about teaching them, right? In a way that they can understand. And if they do have a brain that works a little differently, you may have to teach them with slightly different techniques, right? But it's not about changing who they are. A lot of times will say, well, we're not going to be able to get into their little brains and change around their little neurons and rewire their brains. To a certain extent, yes, they can learn new skills, but we're not going to, if you have an anxious-y type kid, they're always going to be an anxious-y type kid. And they're going to probably be an anxious-y type adult with all the behavioral habits that go with that, right? So it's not that you're going to change anything. It's, you're just teaching them coping strategies. But on the parenting side, you have to learn the same coping strategies because your kids are, you're not going to come see me for a year and then all of a sudden your kid is wired totally differently and never struggles again. Or you as a parent never struggle again. That's not how it works.
How do you
want to be?
How, on average, how much do you think, how much do you observe the resistance of parents changing? Their resistance to change?
Tons.
Yeah.
It's huge. I mean, as people, we resist change, right? Our brains resist change. Our brains like sameness. It's wired to like the same thing. Even if we know that the change is going to produce a better outcome, our brain still will fight against us. But I think there's also such a social stigma around mental health and our kids being different in some way that parents really resist almost acknowledging that there's something different about their child or that they then need to change what's going on, or they have, we all have these ideas in our head of what life should look like. And if our kid thinking differently doesn't fit into that mold of what we wanted our life to look like, then we're going to resist that and try to fit our kid, just like our kid is being made to fit in the box at school or whatever. We may also inadvertently be trying to get our kid to fit in to our box on what we wanted our life to look like. And that may not be the best thing for our kids. So it does take a lot of kind of deep self-work, self stuff to be able to shift your parenting.
Well, I will tell you from personal experience, I believe I still do that to my children. Hey, let's push you in this direction, because they don't have the self-awareness yet. You can observe your child and go, okay, you have a tendency to like sports. You have a tendency to be more creative. You can see where their strengths are and try to push them in that way. But then it's oh, are you doing that because I encouraged you to do that and you're trying to please me? There's this lack of self-awareness on their behalf. I'm teaching women in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, their 60s how to hold the damn boundary and to ask themselves, who do you want to be? Right. And even myself, some days I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this to please somebody else, or I'm doing this because, and I didn't put up that boundary there. So it's such a tricky little freaking thing, because you're trying to encourage and push your child in the right direction. And yet they don't have the self-awareness to be like, oh, that just doesn't work for me. And that's the frustrating part. It's like trial and error.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think parents, a lot of times, once, especially with the point at which parents are coming to me, they've probably gone down what I call the Dr. Google, right? And Googled the heck out of what they think is going on with their kid. And they have now a formed kind of expectation of what they think their child needs. And so a lot of times we do have parents that are almost fighting like an internal battle on, I need to do gentle parenting, or I need to do positive parenting, or whatever buzzword, right? But then the way they were raised and their habits and what they know, right? They've never experienced gentle or positive parenting. They've experienced their version of how they were brought up, and those two may conflict. So it's almost like an internal battle of what's the right thing for my kid. And yeah, the kids don't have self-awareness. That is part of what we have to teach them here, is how to be aware of their body, how to be aware of their emotions, what to even call all that stuff. How do you communicate it? So that then once you identify what the boundary needs to be, you can communicate the boundary. But all of that stuff, yeah, it's all learned skill sets. So a lot of times parents don't have those. So, I think there's an internal battle between pushing your kid, and your kids need to be pushed outside their comfort zone a little bit, because that's the only place they're going to learn. And then, but also still being there as the coach to pick them up and help them dust off when they do fail a little bit. It's like, I call it safe failure, right? Like they fail, but they fail safe. Like you're not going to have your kid go jump off a cliff, but you might teach them, if you're hiking, to jump off of a small rock, build up their confidence a little bit. Right. Yeah. So, safe failure, or like,
safe. Yeah. I like that. Safe failure. It's also exhausting to encourage your children and to be the coach. I'm going to say that as somebody who does it for a living. It's fucking exhausting.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like running a mental marathon every day.
Accurate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's especially for those of us that are kind of in this space where we are holding space for other people all day long. And then we've got to go home and hold space for our kids to figure their own shit out, and push them and help them solve problems and all the rest. Yeah, it's a lot. And even if you're a parent not in a helping field, like your brain's on all day long and working, and and even if you're not working in traditional corporate, you're a stay-at-home mom, there's still a lot of work going on there too. Like it doesn't matter, your brain's still going. And then to show up for your kids, at night, it's exhausting. And there's no right answers.
Well, thanks for that. Thanks.
No problem.
I was looking for the 3 easy tips, and you never gave them to me. So now I'm disappointed. Everyone's been told a lie.
Sorry to disappoint. Well, there is no right answer, because every single kid is different and we don't have a crystal ball, right? But that being said, the science is becoming much, much more clear on the approaches that work in general. So the approaches that work in general are be positive and supportive, model what you want to see, right? And don't do the things for your kid. Let them, like I said, kind of safely fail. Give them opportunities to try something and fail. Then help them do it. What?
They don't like that.
No, they don't.
I'm being told that I'm not, he's not my little project. And I was like, you mean parenting?
You mean parenting?
You are a project to me. I do not understand what the fuck I'm doing. I'm just figuring it out as I go. And trying not to abuse you consciously.
I think if you're trying not to abuse your children, I think you're doing okay.
Oh my God. So, okay, let's go back to the beginning of the conversation. You were talking about your brain and how it works differently. In general, this whole interview / conversation has been pretty positive, right? Pretty positive around knowing that your brain works differently, knowing that your child's brain works differently, letting them feel safe, doing all of these things, and essentially saying, yes, the educational system is not built for, I want to say brains in general, like humans in general.
Correct.
And here we are just putting our children through the system over and over and over again because we have no other choice. And yes, I get that we have homeschooling and unschooling and all of that, but most people are, working and don't have the capacity.
Not feasible.
Pardon?
It's not feasible.
It's not feasible. And we still want our children at other institutions and all of the things. So what advice do you have for the parent that's listening going, okay, diagnosis or not, my child is different. We've done the things. We've attended therapy. I read all the books. I do everything that I am supposed to do. If you had to give one piece of advice, if you're like, if I could just leave the world with one thing, what would that be?
Oh, man. I would say just love your kid. Just show up for them, because the biggest, like we talked about earlier, you asked me what were the things that people did that showed up for you that like made an impact. They were there. They were just there. They didn't give up on me. They didn't even really indicate that there was anything quote unquote wrong with me. They were just there. They cared. They showed that they cared about me, and in doing that, they helped, right? And when you have a kid who thinks differently, and you are in this school system or educational system that wasn't built for, like you said, most brains, it is hard. But the flip side, I'll say, is them learning how to get through that is setting them up for being successful later in life, because life is hard. Mm-hmm. Like you've got a boss that's hard, or, unexpected bills pop up and you've got to figure it out, or somebody gets cancer and you've got to figure that out. And life's not easy. So trying to sugarcoat it is not going to be helpful. But the best thing you can do is just show up and support your kids.
Yeah.
Have a relationship with them so that they know you're a solid person who's always there for them no matter what. And they're going to come back to that. Right. And you can't do any kind of teaching or parenting without that solid relationship. So you've got to start there.
Let them feel safe. Yeah. It always comes back to the relationship, and that although our brain is going to go in a million different directions of like, I want to fix this, or we need to do this. What I heard you say loud and clear is it's really about your ability to show up for your child, knowing that child will look at you and be like, that person will not give up on me.
Right.
They're going to chronically show up for me, and just love your child. You may scream, you may yell, you might have moments, but just apologize and show up and say, we're going to figure it out. We'll do the best that we can.
Well, and even if you are screaming and showing up while screaming, you're going to, and then like you said, and then you apologize, you're showing your kid how to be imperfect.
Yeah.
They need to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just show up. Love them.
So we could talk forever about all the things, but where can people find you?
The easiest is on Instagram at Dr. Kat Baker, DrCatBaker, Dr. Kat Baker. And from there you can link out to my website and all of that.
And your Florida Children's Institute, talk about that.
So the clinic, we're local in Jacksonville, Florida, but we have a lot of online options. And obviously, one thing that was good from COVID is everybody's more used to Zoom now and telehealth and all of that. So we are in Jacksonville, Florida. Florida Children's Institute is the name of my clinic. But like I said, the easiest place to find me and all of the things. And if you want to see the imperfect parenting moments as well, that would be on my page. So if you need a comrade.
Perfect. I just love how you show up. You're like, yeah, I'm a mom. I do all the things. And, we don't know what we don't know until we need to know. And you're a really, really good example of that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Are you ready to take back control of your time and energy? But the thought of where to start feels overwhelming. I created something for you. It's called the Energy Finder quiz. Yep. This quiz takes less than 2 minutes and it helps you identify where to focus so you can conquer your dreams without feeling like you're failing as a mother. After coaching hundreds of women, helping them reverse engineer how they want to feel in their personal and professional lives, I started to notice 4 hidden skills that women must master in order to create the work-life balance that they crave. So head on over to Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN.com/life quiz. heatherchauvin.com/life, LIFE quiz, QUIZ, and get started. I even give you specific podcast episodes to listen to based on your Energy Finder quiz results. The goal is to show you where to focus so you can regain your time and energy and become the woman you deeply know you are capable of becoming. heatherchauvin.com/life quiz.